some lady thinks she could take Donald Trump off of the primary ballot in Maine for the election in 2024. We'll see how that goes, but first, let's get some reasoning from the crazy lady that happens to be the Secretary of State of the state of Maine as she explains herself on CNN. Watch this.
Again, I am so mindful, and I said this in my decision, that it is unprecedented. No Secretary of State has ever deprived a presidential candidate of ballot access based on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But no presidential candidate has ever engaged in insurrection and been disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment.
So the basis to get Donald Trump off of the ballot in Maine is, well, he participated in an insurrection. And if you don't know this, the 14th Amendment, which is what Section 3 is she talking about, was put in place so that no officers or officials in the Confederacy were able to hold public office, which makes sense. If you cause a civil war, you probably shouldn't be in power in the country once it's reunited. But to say that this is the same thing is hilarious in a way, horrifying in another way, and just effing stupid in the last way, the third way, I don't know. The Shayna Bellows, the Secretary of State of Maine, is basically saying, well, Donald Trump led an insurrection. That's the same reasoning that the Colorado Supreme Court said used in order to keep him off the ballot in Colorado. Now, just so we can get this out up front, this is not going to stand. The Supreme Court is going to rule on this, and then the left is going to further perpetuate this whole crazy, out-of-control, radical Supreme Court. But that is a topic for a different time. The Supreme Court is going to weigh in on this, and they're going to say, no, you can't take the person off the ballot. But it's interesting, some of the reasoning. Because I think it's fun, dive into the comment sections of Instagram posts of MSNBC, specifically on this. I said, okay, well then what is the reasoning that Republicans wouldn't remove Democrats from their ballots in red states? And the comments that I would get back would be fascinating, horrifying, but again, fascinating that people don't quite understand what's going on. In their mind, they can think and therefore justify that Donald Trump caused an insurrection. The problem with that is he's never been convicted of that. And Jack Smith, the federal charges against Donald Trump regarding January 6th, isn't even charging him with that. So not only has he not been convicted of that in a court of law, he isn't even being charged by the federal government of the thing that he's being taken off the ballots for, which is then a problem. I then said, yeah, I posed the question, well, what is stopping red states from taking Joe Biden and Democrats off of their ballots? And they said, well, they didn't start an insurrection. I said, wow, when did he get convicted of that? And if the precedent is you don't need to be convicted, if that's the reasoning that you're going to go off of, well, then there's lots of things that Joe Biden can get taken off the ballot for. One, gross negligence in the way he handled Afghanistan that led to 13 deaths of U.S. servicemen and women, which is terrible. You can also take him off the ballot for not doing his job at the border, which is not something that is secret to the American people at the moment. You can take him off the ballot for engaging in foreign business deals with his son Hunter, who was being paid millions of dollars to do effectively nothing but sell influence to his dad. Bottom line is, there are a ton of things. If you don't need to be convicted of something, there are tons of things that Republicans in red states can take Joe Biden off the ballot from. Now, here's the problem with all of this. I don't think that this should be the direction the country goes. I don't think that Republicans should take Joe Biden off the ballot in the same way that I don't think Democrats should take Donald Trump off the ballot. But unfortunately, we are in a political position where you need to fight fire with fire. And I know that the Supreme Court was going to make quick work of this, but if stuff like this happens and is allowed to happen under a different Supreme Court, if the court changes over the next couple years and Democrats try to take Republicans off the ballots, then yes, Republicans should respond in a similar fashion. What I think should happen here in the Supreme Court, or at least what I think would be beneficial to the country as a whole, is if the Supreme Court decision to leave Trump on the ballot is unanimous. I think that would help America greatly to have the liberal justices side with the conservative justices in saying, no, you can't just take political opponents off the ballot. Of course, if there is a legal standing that Donald Trump did, or if anybody did do things that disqualify them, then yeah, that's a different question. But so far, this is just political. And to pretend that it's not is crazy. Here's a clip of the same Secretary of State in Maine, Shayna, Bellows, talking about election integrity and democracy just a couple years ago. Watch this. Maybe not. Here we go. Watch this.
But that type of activity, so make no mistake, what we saw nationwide around the country in 2020 that created anxiety about whether the will of the voters would be heard, is those forces that would undermine our elections and the integrity of our elections and democracy are still very much at work nationwide.
Yeah, and so that's definitely not political. She's just an arbiter of truth, doesn't have any political leanings, despite saying what she said about the 2020 election and sticking to her guns on that point. Just for the record, too, there's a bunch of states that have taken this up, or people that have proposed this in different states, where the Democrat-led states have said, no, we're not going to do that. California specifically will have the option to vote for President Trump, former President Donald Trump, in the 2024 GOP primary, despite the state's lieutenant governor calling to remove him from the ballot. Activists in Oregon have tried to do the same thing. Minneapolis, citing the same 14th Amendment in a plottable move of sanity. The Democrat-controlled states said, nah, you can't do that. Hopefully, sanity will prevail on a bigger and broader sense, but until now, we have a situation where the former president of the United States, the guy who's leading in the polls, is being taken off the ballot for something he has not been convicted of doing. That is a terrible precedent to set if you are a country, and will only lead to a bad thing. I want to know, and seriously, is a serious question, what do you think will happen if this sort of thing is allowed to continue? Do you think Republicans will just go, oh, shucks, they got us? No. All hell will break loose, and everyone will lose from every party, and every person will be worse off because of it. This is a terrible way to go about doing things. They know that, or at least they should know that, and I guess we'll all see how it shakes out in the Supreme Court, hopefully sooner than later, and hopefully as a unanimous decision.